Hey, gamers, this is Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with Dr. Christienne Hinz, a gaming genius in the classroom, and also the current director of Zenobia 2. How you doing tonight, Christienne?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful having you on. So we're going to talk very, very quickly about something that is important to Zenobia applicants, present and future, which is that if you look at your concept proposal instructions and at the rubric, there's a section that is devoted to ethical considerations. So we are here to unpack that a little bit for you and make sure that we're all on the same page with regard to what we want in that section of the concept proposal and what that means you should be thinking about when you write it. So, Christiane, when we say ethics, what are we getting at with that use of the word?
We are getting at the responsibility that game designers have to treat their subject matter and the people they're representing in their games and their stories in an ethical manner. Um, you may or may not think about game design in the history genre in this manner, but it is essentially the same thing that professional historians do, which is to gather information and to make an argument about the causes or the consequences or the trajectory of someone's story, right? So, um, to write a history, to design a historical game is absolutely an act of power where you have the ability to create an impression or deliver messages, you know, explicit or implicit, about someone else. And so, how you treat someone else, especially those people and cultures that are historically underrepresented, is a subtle and delicate matter that should be treated with thoughtfulness, rather than a repetition of old stereotypes or unexamined biases or things like that. So that's partly what we're talking about.
So, in order to have a good ethics section, that means that you're going to need to kind of examine yourself and your subject matter to look for places where maybe you might get in your own way or where your biases might impact your depiction of the people and subject matter.
Yes, that's correct. But also, it also implies doing due diligence in your research, in that there are plenty of textbooks or secondary materials or movies or historical narratives that pre-exist that you will have encountered that can shape your way of thinking about a particular subject matter. So if you want to study an underrepresented person or underrepresented group or an underrepresented culture or an untold historical narrative, or that's a historical narrative that's told only from the perspectives of the winners, then you have absorbed perhaps a bias, that if you heard the story from the perspective of the subject people that you're actually studying, they might tell a very different story or have a very different experience. Um, so how we would represent, say, a colonial narrative, we've learned it from the colonizer's point of view. And repeating that narrative is not doing service to the people that you're trying to represent. That would be an example that can happen. It can be your biases. Your biases are often absorbed from the research you do. So you have to look very hard, or very self consciously, to understand the materials that you're reading and to see whose perspective are they representing, and what kind of image are they creating about the people that you're trying to represent.
I love it. And then, of course, in game terms, I actually also believe that these ethical considerations frequently lead to more interesting games because they also shake you out of kind of the same rails that people have been following for a long time. And
Yes.
I actually think this is something you should approach with seriousness, but also excitement because it also makes you think about, okay, what kind of situation or conflict do I want to represent in this game, and whose story does this favor? What kind of agency am I giving players in the game? Who are they acting as? What are they able to do? You want it to be historically accurate, but you can also pick angles to view your game and its conflict from, that are interesting, especially if you've been thinking about things like point of view and representation and how to, really bring the right aspects of your history out of your game. Uh,
Really well said, Liz. It's part of the work of Zenobia, um, to find stories told by underrepresented people. Um, and so there's a doorway through which we can go that will allow us to tell new stories, even if the topic may seem old, right? Or it's well established someplace else. So we can tell subversive stories, the potential to tell subversive stories, it's right there. The question is whether or not we're burdened with images and ideas. I mean, this is something that you can see very clearly in art, in the game. And while in Zenobia, we're not at the point where we're interested in making art, you can still be thinking about how how the artwork speaks to the people to the stories that you're trying to tell, right? You can still think, okay, I want to write a game, or I want to develop a game, or I want to design a game rather, that depicts something about the Battle of Little Bighorn. Okay, but I want to do it from the indigenous perspective. Let's say this was a game idea that you had. The question is whether or not you're burdened with images of indigenous people, um, that build on old racist tropes of the savage or the noble savage or any of these kind of ideas, and how would that could appear in your artwork. You could be reproducing that accidentally. So the question is, do you have some cultural consultants? Can you consult with someone about positive ways to depict people who are not yours? Can you find people who can make stories or tell stories about this material, that subverts the kind of narrative that, say Americans typically hear about, the relationship between, colonialism and indigenous people? So, can you find voices that are authentic, and preserve that, right? So these are ideas for how you can deal with these notions of when you're trying to represent someone who's not yourself, that's someone who's from not from your culture.
Absolutely. And so we intend these videos to be short, so I'll start wrapping up. But I think the upshot of this is the ethics section of your concept proposal. It's not something to panic about. It's not something that should overly stress you, but it is a way to show that you're thinking about things. You don't have to be perfect because nobody who's representing history is perfect. But what we do want to see is effort, awareness, and the ability to contextualize the project you're doing, both historically and in the wider world that Zenobia is operating in. Would you say that's about right?
That says it perfectly. That's absolutely right.
So, with that, hopefully this video was helpful in giving you a sense of how to absolutely kill it on your concept proposal. We're looking forward to reading it. And so, if you're a Zenobia applicant watching this, good luck out there. Thank you so much. And we can't wait to see what you've got to say.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Christienne.
Thank you.